For this DIY, I'm using 4 of these window cling sets from Dollar Tree with the cute little bunny on it. And I'm also using some Mod Podge and a paintbrush. I'm using dishwasher safe Mod Podge. You can use regular matte or glossy Mod Podge. This is just what I had on hand. And then I'm also using 4 charger plates. Now I believe I got these at Hobby Lobby for around $1 on mega clearance, but Dollar Tree sells a ton of different styles of charger plates, so you can pick some up there. I do recommend getting the charger plates that don't have like the beading around the border for this project. And you will also need a squeegee or a scraper tool, and I highly recommend taking a picture of how you want your design to look on the plate. And you don't have to worry about the clings sticking to the plate because they are clings. They have no adhesive backing, so you can move them around. So that's what I'm showing you here, is that I just took a picture of what I wanted it to look like after I placed the Mod Podge, because once you place the Mod Podge down on the plate, you need to work kind of quickly before it starts drying, because it does dry pretty quickly. So when you're applying the Mod Podge, you just want to make sure you do like a thin layer. You don't want to lay it on too thick, kind of just spread it out. That's what I'm kind of doing right here. I'm just going around the middle and then around the outside edge. And I'm going to end up using 3 coats, or doing 3 layers of Mod Podge. And you want to let the Mod Podge sit for at least 2 hours in between coats. I actually let mine sit overnight for the second coat, and then the third coat I waited like 3 or 4 hours because I was just busy. But you want to make sure it's completely dry before adding the next layer. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the bottom layer is not going to have enough time to dry, and it's going to smudge, kind of like when you get your nails done or you paint your nails. If you paint them too fast before the bottom layer dries, it's going to smudge your nails. So after I apply the Mod Podge, I just begin layering my window clings on top of the plate and using my picture that I had taken as my reference for placing all of the eggs around the border. And you really want to make sure that the parts that overlap onto the lip of the plate, you want to make sure that those are flush and flattened out. And then I also use my squeegee later on and go back and get out all of the air bubbles. But for now, I'm just focusing on the placement of everything and getting everything down because again, that Mod Podge does dry pretty quickly. I mean, not too fast, but it does dry pretty quickly. So that's just what I'm doing right here. And then after I get everything placed down, I'm going to take my squeegee and get out those air bubbles. And you can kind of see that the Mod Podge underneath is coming out of the edges of the design. So after that, I just use that extra Mod Podge to kind of go around and seal up the edges of each of the clings. And that's really going to help it stay in place while it's drying. And then once it's completely dry, I can go back and add the second layer and then the third layer. And that's pretty much it for this DIY. Not a whole lot of steps to make these. And again, I do add 2 more coats later on to each of the plates. But this DIY is so easy. I think it would also be a fun DIY to do with kids, because Dollar Tree is always selling these window clings year-round for the different holidays and seasons. So I think it would be a fun little project for them too. And I did end up making 4 to use in a tablescape, but you can make 1, of course, and just use it as a decor piece. And one final note that I want to mention is that if you are using a glossy finish like I am with the Mod Podge, you really want to try and have your brush strokes all going in the same direction. And use a foam brush if you can, because if you kind of brush it on haphazardly like I am, you're going to see all of those brush strokes after it's dried because of the glossy finish. I wasn't aware of how glossy this particular Mod Podge was because I've never used it before. I think that if I would have gone with maybe using the matte Mod Podge instead, I think it might have looked a little bit better, but I still think these turned out really cute. And as for the last little window cling, it fits perfectly in the center of these Dollar Tree bread plates. So if you're doing a tablescape for Easter, these would look really cute as well. This next DIY was inspired by this project I found on Pinterest. I'm not sure who the DIY artist is. There was no link to a blog or like an Instagram page, but I thought it was very shabby chic looking and it would be easy to make with Dollar Tree products. I ended up using just one of these microfiber washcloths out of this pack, but you could also use fabric from the Crafter Square section. And I also used 2 4x6 picture frames and this trim from Valentine's Day at Dollar Tree. I start off by removing the glass from the frames. I only needed the frame itself and the backing since I will be putting the flowers in it for a 3-dimensional effect. And then I unfold one of those microfiber washcloths and I cut it right down the middle where the crease is with my Dollar Tree rotary cutter. And I love this thing. It's one of my favorite tools from Dollar Tree, and I actually bought a backup recently just in case this one breaks. But I absolutely recommend this rotary cutter from Dollar Tree. It's very inexpensive compared to ones that you would find at like a big craft store. But next I just take some hot glue and applied it to the back of the stand of the picture frame and then laid my washcloth on top so that it was lined up at the top. And you can see hot glue lines through the microfiber washcloth, but I knew I was going to be covering it up with flowers, so it didn't bother me. But you could also use fabric tack, but I just use a glue gun for fast drying time for filming purposes. And then next, I just use my rotary cutter again to trim off the excess that is hanging off of the sides, but not the bottom because I'm actually going to be using that to make my pocket. So to do that, I just folded the bottom piece over and marked with my finger where I wanted the top of the pocket to be, and then I cut where I had marked with my finger. Then I just added hot glue to the edges of the pocket flap. And of course, you can get as creative as you want with this project. You can use different colored fabrics, you can use pattern fabrics, you can do some hand sewing or even use your sewing machine if you want to pre-measure everything out. There's really no limit to this project. I mean, there's endless possibilities for the outcome. Moving on to pocket number 2, I followed the same steps as far as gluing the fabric to the backing, but I forgot that I wasn't supposed to cut off the bottom, but that's okay because you'll see how I fix it. Glue, I just fix it with glue because glue fixes everything, but all I do is glue the bottom edge to the bottom edge. Then I make a house shape by cutting a triangle off of one side and then using that piece as a reference to cut the other side. Then I glue down the sides, and then to make the envelope or pocket front, I use a tiny bit of glue on the 3 points of the triangle. Then it was time to decorate my picture frame pockets, and again, you can get as creative as you want with this. I ended up using some Dollar Tree ribbon with a floral print to decorate the envelope pocket, as well as a button, and then on the other one, I used that Dollar Tree trim as a border. Then I just pulled out some of my Dollar Tree florals that looked like spring flowers, and I just started trimming off little pieces here and there from different flower bunches to make them kind of look like wildflowers. I think this DIY would be perfect for like a shabby chic or vintage themed wedding. Maybe you could put them as a centerpiece with different table numbers sticking out of the pockets with flowers, or maybe even for a vintage themed baby shower or bridal shower. I love making banners out of these little fabric gift bags from Dollar Tree. I thought this one was very shabby chic and vintage looking because of the polka dots and light colors. And to turn these little gift bags into a banner, you just cut them in half. So all you need to do is cut 3 sides because the top opens up and it already has the holes to run the string through. And you'll also want to be sure to pull out the drawstring that it comes with. But you can trim these up to be as neat as possible to your liking. I, however, prefer the imperfect look with all the little strings and fraying on the edges, so I left some of that. And you could also cut the bottom to be a single or double point banner if you want, or garland, but I decided not to do that for my banner. And then once everything looked good, I dug through some ribbon scraps to find a piece long enough, and that kind of went with the color scheme I was going for. You could use twine, a shoelace even, and then to string the ribbon through the holes at the top, I just use a bobby pin to thread it through. You could also use a paper clip. I used 2 packages of these faux moss bunnies to add to the banners without the polka dots. And I decided to use the bunnies that were, I guess, in like the crouching position. I don't know what you would call that. But I just used some hot glue and glued them to the banner facing in the same direction. I thought it would be cute to add some pearls to the banner as well. Whenever I think of shabby chic or vintage, pearls usually come to mind. So I just took, I think, 4 small pearl beads and added them sporadically to each of the polka dot banners with a little dab of hot glue. I wanted to use up the rest of those moss bunnies, so I decided to attach them to little tree stumps with hot glue and make them look like they were sitting. The wood rounds or mini little tree stumps are also from Dollar Tree, and I thought these would be cute to add to my entryway terrarium that I have a vintage Bambi book for spring in. I used Dollar Tree moss to line the bottom as well to make it look like a forest scene for Thumper and his friends, but there's a ton of different things that you can do with these little moss bunnies. One year, I actually made them look like they were trapped in a cloche or a jar with some moss in there as well. You could also glue them to the top of a mason jar as like a little candy dish for jelly beans. There's a ton of different projects that you can do with these cute little moss bunnies. And this last little vintage themed DIY is so easy. You just need some of this Dollar Tree shelf liner and then this wood bunny blank from the Crafter's Square section. And I can't tell you how many rolls of this print I have purchased from Dollar Tree over the years. I have used it in so many different DIY projects, even in my junk journals I've used it. But super easy. All you need to do is cut a piece off of the roll large enough to cover the whole rabbit, ears to tail. And then you're just going to remove the backing from the shelf liner and then place the bunny on top of the sticky side of the shelf liner. I chose the side that didn't have the raised detail in the ears, but you can use either side. Then I just smoothed my hand over, making sure that there were no bubbles. And then I took an X-Acto knife to very precisely and carefully trim off the excess. And I couldn't find my my sandpaper sponge. So I just found an old nail file and buffer and went over the edges. Now, My crusty old nail file didn't work well, but if you have a sanding block, I'm sure you get the idea. It'll probably work a lot better. Then to make the rabbit decor look aged or vintage looking, I took my Distress Oxide by Tim Holtz and a Dollar Tree blending makeup brush to ink around the edges of the wood and the shelf liner. And then whatever was left over on my brush, I just blended over the whole rabbit. And I just used him as a background on one of my shelves by my TV. And honestly, the pattern on this is so busy. You don't really need to do a whole lot to this or anything else for this DIY, unless of course you want to. But I preferred just the look of this vintage looking contact paper, and that was enough for me. That was it for this small round of vintage or shabby chic inspired spring DIYs. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would love a thumbs up. It really does help my channel out a lot. And if you decide to recreate any of these DIYs, I would love to see how your projects turned out. You can tag me on Instagram. And if you aren't currently subscribed, I really hope you'll consider subscribing and make sure that you turn on your notifications so that you never miss an upload. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next one. Take care and happy crafting.